No.
Not yet. I know Chris just accepted the meeting.
Oh, okay.
If we don't have a quorum, I guess we'll. What is a quorum again? We're 6. So. There's Devin. Great.
All right.
Hi,
Well, I
Devin.
Hey, guys.
think we have critical mass now.
Yeah, we can get started, I think. I think Chris is going to join us soon.
Okay.
So, welcome everybody.
I don't have a gavel.
Right. We need a virtual one.
Yeah. Like all to order, or you want me to wait a minute or two?
Let's wait.
Okay.
Hopefully we get done by 8:30. No pressure though.
I gotta get up at 5. I guess 5:30.
Oh,
I have to admit that I hated Zooming. I hated teaching from home, but the commute was so much better than driving to McMinnville.
Oh, I bet.
I hear you. My commute is going downstairs.
Yeah, that was what mine was too.
Chris. Yeah. Yeah, I was able to borrow another monitor from my wife, so that was good. Hi.
Hey, Chris.
Good evening, everybody. How y'all doing?
Evening.
Pretty good.
Good to see your faces again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you too. All right, let's kick it off. So this is the June 10th, 2020 regular meeting of the Oregon City Natural Resources Committee. And
So I have my imaginary gavel and I call the meeting. The start
our
of the
first ever meeting via Zoom,
Yeah.
and our first meeting for quite some time. So it's good to see everybody.
Yeah.
And you guys have the agenda, so I've got it up on my screen here. So I'd like to introduce Josh Wheeler, who's our Assistant City Engineer, correct? And let me make sure. Yep. So Josh is going to give us a presentation on the proposed revisions to the Oregon City Municipal Code Chapter 1744, which is our Geologic Hazards Code. Take it away, Josh. Do you want to share the screen, or do you want me to click through things for you?
I'll share the screen.
Okay.
Assuming I can find it.
It should be at the bottom middle. It should be a green thing.
Yeah, I found that. I can't find my.
Oh.
The toolbar, yes.
Yeah.
The elusive toolbar.
Let's see. Go back here.
Okay. Yeah, it's working.
Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Coming through.
And so now you see it as a full presentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So hi, everyone. I've not been before the Natural Resource Committee before. I started with the city back in, I think my start date was April 30th of 2018. I was hired as the Development Projects Manager with...
Hang on, let me mute myself because my dog's
No problem. Was intended to be a person that was the supervisor for all development and engineering, but with some adjustments and some other things, I found that I needed to branch out and do more than just that. So we adjusted my title to Assistant City Engineer, sometime in the last year. I forget when it happened. And so now I take care of the development stuff, but I also take care of miscellaneous engineering things from codes to standards, all the way to even small capital projects. So just kind of a mix of things. I've been in Oregon since 2014, and so I dealt with some of these sorts of things down in Benton County, where we have some hilly areas where we had to deal with things in the geologic hazard realm. Why am I here tonight? We at Public Works are proposing a large amount of code changes. I guess we're kind of calling them Public Works code changes, and we've made a application through planning for a legislative file for that. Those code changes range from sewer and water adjustments to some definition clarification to some things with overhead utilities. And lastly, geologic hazards. The reason we're proposing changes to geologic hazards is because within the past year, we have had a few different presentations. We did one to the Planning Commission during the Beaver Creek Concept Plan. We then sat through Dogami and DLCD, assuming you know those two groups. They did a presentation on a new landslide guide that they created, and we were directed by the City Commission to look at our code and see if our code was up to par with that new guideline. Interestingly enough, that guideline was created with Oregon City and a few other cities in mind. So we're actually referenced and used as examples in that guideline. So I'm pretty proud about that. I can't really take the credit though. I convey the information. The credit really goes to Nancy Crushauer because she's the one that really brought the Geologic Hazard Code to where it is today. And if you don't know, she was the previous Public Works Director prior to John Lewis. Let's jump in. This is what I'm going to go over, a little history. I'm going to go over the new guide, where we can do some enhancement, and what the existing resources are, and then I'll just kind of end with next steps. So back in 2009, Ordinance 08-1014 created some of our geologic hazard code. We then updated it fairly quickly in 2010 with a new ordinance, and that's pretty much the code we have today. I cannot find any revisions to the code since that time. We currently use a consultant for our development review. Prior to Nancy retiring, Nancy took all that review because she had a background in that. I only have enough background to be dangerous in it, as well as my predecessor. And so we use Foundation Engineering, who's a geotechnical consultant, and they're the ones that do development review whenever private development comes in. We also have a consultant on board named GRI, who is a geotechnical consultant, and they're doing oversight on some monitoring we're doing of the Armory property, which is currently under demolition, as well as Trillium Drive over by the hospital. We're monitoring that on a quarterly basis to see how it's moving, if it's moving, and then analyzing what we can do to try and prevent it from moving, if we can. Back last year, October 2019, DLCD and Dogami jointly did a presentation to the City Commission about their new landslide guide. We did a presentation to the Planning Commission, as I referenced earlier, about during the Beaver Creek Concept Plan on September 23rd of last year. And then in March of 2019, as well as February of this year, we went to the Development Stakeholders Group and told them about the changes that we're proposing. In the City Commission and the Planning Commission meetings, we were not talking about the revisions at all. That was really more about the landslide guide and what we currently do. The discussion to the stakeholders group was very directly about these revisions. So you're actually the second group to hear about them. So about that landslide guide, it was published in October of 2019. It's linked on our website. It's also linked on DLCD and Dogami's website. And like I said earlier, we were used as an example in presenting the guide. In fact, some of the pictures in the guide are actually from our mapping system. There are some areas that we feel we could do some code enhancement. We believe there would need to be clarification when a review is required. So right now, it says whenever a steep slope is involved, and then it kind of references a landslide deposit area, but it's not 100% clear in my mind. So we've actually clarified that to make sure that absolutely you can be as flat as a pancake, but if you're in an old landslide deposit, the same exact situation applies and you need to be reviewed just as strongly as a steep slope. We've also tried to clarify what type of land disturbance should be reviewed. So there's data in there about what should be reviewed, how much grading should occur, what size of a building before we actually use the code. But there were some things that were missing that we had found over the last 2 years that when we came to a situation, we didn't really know what to do. We're like, does this apply? And we asked our consultant and he made the determination. But now that we're doing that on a regular basis, we added those clarifications into the code. We also reference the new state guide in the code because the current code does reference all the various guides that are related to geologic hazards. We felt it important to add this guide to the code because it's one more thing that's now being used. We're also requesting additional items in the application process. Stormwater management is something that I felt was lacking in the code. In fact, my staff also felt the same thing, that it was an afterthought the way the code is written. But we were finding more and more that the water hitting the ground or someone's gutters or some type of conveyance like a swale could cause just as much problem as a steep slope because it could loosen the ground fairly quickly. And right now, the current code really says if you're an acre or more, you should care about the stormwater. Well, we've actually enhanced that and said, yes, you should do a hydrology study, which is a very enhanced stormwater study. But we've also said you need to consider stormwater in any way in your application. So if you're emptying gutters, if you're creating a swale, you need to show how that's going to impact the underlying land. We've also talked about construction phasing. We had a recent situation where someone was not disturbing land, which is what the code says. However, they were having construction traffic all over the geologic hazard area, even though there was no digging going on. And things like an asphalt roller which vibrates, well, that could easily loosen the land as well. And we talked to our geotechnical consultant and he agreed. And so we've added that in, that construction phasing and construction methods is absolutely needs to be considered as well. I just talked about the hydrology. And okay, now I remember what that says. It's been a while since I created this presentation. The existing code says that if you're a 1 acre property, you're required to do a hydrology report. We've changed that now to say, okay, if you're a 1 acre property, yes. But we've also said, if you're in a map landslide area, that 1 acre doesn't apply at all. If you're 0.1 acres and you're in a map landslide area, unless you're one of the exempted situations, you also have to do a hydrology report. We didn't feel the 1 acre was sufficient enough. Some other standards that are written here, and the reason they're all together, they're minor in our case, they're clarifications. We actually have a waiver process that we use of determining if something is exempt. Sometimes there is some subjectivity to it, even though we try and be as clear and objective as possible. Geotechnical engineering is a science that deals with probabilities, not black and white necessarily. So we have to kind of mix the concern of land use, clear and objective, with the reality of geotechnical science. So we do have a waiver process where if a property has a geologic hazard on it, but they're not really touching it, we can give them a waiver because they're not really truly impacting the geologic hazard. We're codifying that based on a recommendation of our city attorney. We're clarifying our weather window. So currently you can work in a geologic hazard between May 1st and October 31st, but then you get exceptions that you can start as early as March 15th if we think the weather was good, or stay as late as November 30th if we think the weather was good. Well, that goes back to being subjective, not clear and objective, and has got us into all sorts of he said, she said, we don't agree with you situations over the past couple of years. And so what we've done is said how we determine if the weather is bad. And so we put data in there such as if there's been a X amount of rain within the past week, you cannot proceed. Something like that is in the code now, or will be. That's what we're proposing. We're also requiring certification by the professional engineers that are doing these plans. We're being much more specific about that. Clarifying some things about density, clarifying some things about storm drainage. That gets into some really technical things that unless you want to get into it, we can. But ultimately, it's a way to really dial in exactly what we need to see from applicants to be as sure as we can. We're never going to be 100% sure, but as sure as we can that no future problem will occur. We're also doing some clarity on our construction standards with respect to erosion control, review by other agencies, inspections after rain event. That all deals during construction. There's a section of the code that deals with during construction what happens. And so we were doing a practice of what needs to happen, but it wasn't really codified. So we have added those in as details. And we now require, and we've been doing this I think about 4 years now, a couple years before I started, and we've added it into the code that any project that is required to go through geologic hazard land use and does not get a waiver must sign a liability, what's it called? An indemnity agreement, which makes the city not liable if anything were to happen on that property, that they assume liability and they know that they are going to be on a landslide area, which could potentially slide. We can never be 100% sure. That gets recorded on the property in perpetuity and stays forever. And so that makes it to try and get the city out of any liability, because we have had situations from projects 20, 30, 40 years ago that we've had problems with in recent years that we didn't have that back then, and so we became the responsible party. We're trying to get out of that responsibility, not just to get out of it. I mean, that's nice and all, but also to put the property owner on notice that this is a serious piece of property, that this is not just something to look the other way on, that you really need to, put your ducks in a row and make sure that you know what you're doing here. And that's why we're really requiring that now. Lastly, there are some existing resources that exist for all this information. Our city code is chapter 1744. People can look at that. On our mapping system that we lovingly call OC Maps, we have LIDAR, which is the satellite information. We have every slope determined by that LIDAR. We have landslide deposits based on data from DLCD and Dogami. We have landslide features such as things called scarps and things of that sort. We, again, have reference to the DLC Dogami landslide guide. We also have a link to the Dogami homeowners guide, and we like to tell people about that on a regular basis. Our city website has a whole page about geologic hazards, which links to all these things. We now have a checklist that every single property that requires to go through geologic hazards, we make them fill out a checklist to say, to get a permit from us, you need to complete all of these items. It's a one-page checklist, if I recall. And it basically takes the code and puts it into checklist form so that it's a little easier for a consultant to use. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. Our next steps are basically to continue the public outreach, continue the public information, continue with the land use application. And then ultimately, that process takes probably 6 months at a minimum is our guess at the moment. So we're hoping to have these revisions in place, hopefully by the beginning of the year. If not sooner, or if the city commission chooses, or the planning commission wants to talk about them in more detail, or the other topics go a little longer, then whenever that process gets done is when they'll become effective. So any questions you have or any comments you'd like to make, we'd love to hear them.
Josh, Mike Hamilton. I'm curious about your data sources. You said satellite-based LiDAR, but that's pretty low res. Do you have airborne LiDAR that covers the city? Or does the state offer that? Or
Yes, that's something that our GIS folks get on a regular basis. Typically the city is flown once a year, and that's where our LiDAR comes from, is my understanding.
okay, because you said satellite, but it's airborne. So
Yeah, I used the word satellite. You're right. It's actually LiDAR. It's from airplanes.
Okay, and then how many ground samples that typically get taken for projects, and does that inform your spatial data set?
So that's purely up to the geotechnical engineer doing the work. And then if we feel they didn't take enough data sets, then our consultant then gives them comments back and says, this is not adequate. This does not really show us what's really going on. We actually had a project like that this past year in the Kanema area, where someone did a couple borings and showed what was going on and what the soils were like. And we happened to know a lot about that area.
Right.
So we said, no, this is not representative of what you're doing. You need to go out and do a lot more. And so even though there's a little subjectivity there, we do that. We really rely on our consultant a very large amount.
Okay. If I can ask one more question. You mentioned the armory, and I walked by it today, and it's almost completely demolished. I mean, there's one little pile of rubble left, and it will be cleaned down to dirt. A lot of questions came up about why that building was raised and what the process was. Somebody said it was the Army that did it. So I'm just curious the history of removing that building. And,
there's a lot of information surrounding that property, and I'm definitely not the one to know everything about that property. The small things that I know is that the ridge behind it, which goes to Waterboard Park, does have slide activity going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we monitor that on a regular basis. Yeah. We did, I believe the land is currently owned by the state. And then there might be some land transactions happening in the future. I'm not totally up on that, but we provided a geotechnical review on that. We provided right-of-way permits for that. We provided grading permits for that. I don't know if planning was involved. I know building was involved for a demolition permit. So yeah, there was a lot of people involved, and a lot of people knew what was going on, because that is a site of interest within the city.
Well, anybody associated with the city gets asked the question, so it's come up, in conversations. And,
Yeah, planning was not involved in the demolition permit, Mike.
Okay.
I
didn't think so, because I hadn't heard anything from you.
Yeah, it was through the building division. But the decision making that led up to the demolition permit was at a very high level. It was all the way up to the city commission knew about it. Tony Conkle knew about it.
Okay.
And it was a very public procedure, I understand.
Okay. So it predated me, I think, because I've only been around for 2 years. So.
Yeah. Well, there's an ongoing discussion about Waterboard Park, obviously, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Good presentation, by the way, Josh. Appreciate all
Thank
that.
you.
Hey Josh, this is Trent. Sorry I was late. I had some technical difficulties, but one quick question. You might have answered it. You were referring to steep slopes when I come in, and I was just curious what % slope you guys are regarding steep slopes.
Anything that is 25 to 35% is developable, but must go through the geologic hazard land use process.
Okay.
Anything less than 25% is exempt. Anything 35% or greater must also go through the geologic hazard land use process. However, 35% or greater, we do everything in our power to prevent development from occurring on those slopes.
Yep, I can understand that. So cool. Thank you for that clarification.
And then did you mention how the overlay, the actual spatial overlay works in the GIS system, Josh?
I didn't really, except for the fact that the LiDAR informs the slopes, and then the landslide data actually comes from Dogami. So that's, that's where all that comes from.
Okay, I was just going to add then that the way that the overlay works is there's a 50-foot buffer from the toe and crest of any slope that's 25% or more, a 200-foot buffer mapped for any known landslide. And so those things will overlap occasionally, and that forms the overlay. But there could be things that come up through the course of investigation that get pulled into the review process as well. But it's rare. I think the overlay captures pretty much everything.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Josh.
thanks for your time tonight. And I see Chris unmuted. Did you have a question or anything, sir?
Oh, no, I just wanted to chime in and say that really appreciated the presentation. It was thorough, and I'm not left with any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, and if
Thanks.
anything that comes up at any time, feel free to either reach out to myself, reach out to Pete. He can get a hold of me, and I'm happy to go over this information at any time with anyone.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, everyone.
Great, you're free.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Welcome, everybody. Hi.
Hi, Trent.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there.
Good to see your smiling faces. Where Doug got to. I don't see an email from him, but yeah.
How savvy is he with computers and Zoom?
Well, I was on a Zoom with him about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
He probably was. He's on enough committees around here. So
Yeah, I would think he's got conflicts.
yeah.
All right. Shall I jump into the next presentation?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure, go for it.
Please.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen where it is. This one. Oh, hang on. Go to that. Let's see.
Of course, Wednesday night had to fall on the one night it's not raining this week.
Right.
I know, right?
Let's see.
It was crazy Monday. We were out in Forest Park and it just dumped on us.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully you can see an OC 2040 slide. Is that the case?
Not yet.
We see the
Geologic hazards again.
Josh's presentation.
PowerPoint is still there.
All right, I'll close out of this. Yeah. Okay. Try again.
There we go.
Yep, we're in
Good.
business.
There it is.
All right, I'm not going to touch anything. We'll just use this.
I'm not getting the whole screen, but it's just the banner on the bottom that's getting cut off.
Does that make a difference?
It didn't.
No.
No, but it's just the banner. We're probably fine. We know it's Oregon City.
Yeah.
Got two screen problem. Hang on. Sorry. Summary. Gosh darn. Okay, can you see it?
It hasn't
Just
changed.
like the PowerPoint file itself, like, yeah, we can see it. It's just not in like slideshow display.
Right. Okay.
There is a zoom scaler on the bottom right.
Yeah.
Make it smaller. If I see it.
Is it prioritizing your second monitor as the primary?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I forget where the setting is, but you can choose which screen you want to have the display on. And I think it's, I have no idea. Maybe the display settings are down there in the bottom right-hand part of the bar, but also we can see the full thing here. So
Yeah. It's not okay. It's a pretty simple thing. So I'll stay here.
Okay.
All right. We've just begun the very first part of the update process for the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. We have secured our consultant, which is 3J Consulting. They do a lot of public engagement. They do a lot of comprehensive plan updates throughout the state. I've worked with them extensively over the years, and I have every confidence in their ability to do good outreach. And so what they've prepared and what was in your packet was a draft document for their public involvement plan for community vision. And I'm just going to provide a summary of what we're talking about in that plan. And and feel free to ask me questions as we go through. At the end of the presentation, if you have any suggestions for me, I'm just going to send those. I will write them down and send them along to Steve Faust, our consultant, and we'll be using this document for the next year as our guide for community vision. So what is the comprehensive plan? And it is a roadmap for decision making for city staff and officials, and we use the goals and policies in the plan to evaluate and make decisions about everything from new development to neighborhood plans, for transportation planning, and a variety of other topics. So whenever you have a major decision to be made, whether it's legislative file or a master plan for a big institution like the college or something like that, we look at the comprehensive plan to see what level of policy and goal guidance is in there. And it's been since 2003 that it hasn't been updated in a full way. It's been updated via comprehensive plans and, concept plans and the adoption of various updates to our public facilities plans. Anytime that we make a decision that affects the entire city or big portions of it, that's an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And it controls not just the city limit, but out to the urban growth boundaries as well. And ideally, these documents are a living and working document that people refer to, but frequently they don't. They're just sitting on a shelf gathering dust, except for the planners that look at them. And we would like that to change. We would like it to become a much more user-friendly document and approachable, shorter, easier to use, and as I'm going to talk about, a lot more equitable and inclusive than it has been. So the plan process that's shown here includes a lot of things, but how we address growth and how we establish our values as a community. And it starts with a visioning process, which is an in-depth community visioning and listening phase, where we're asking two basic questions, which is, what do you like about Oregon City, or what brought you here, either to live or to work, and what would you change if you could? And what would you like to see in the future? So that's the basic question. Those are the basic questions. We've just putting out a survey that I'm going to be sending out via our email blast program. And this week will be the first of 3 surveys that we're going to use to start this process. This is our timeline. There's 4 basic general phases with community engagement all the way through. We've got the visioning process starting now and going through October, then actually crafting a vision for adoption by resolution of the City Commission that would be done around January of next year. And then based off of that vision document, we start updating the chapters in the comprehensive plan. And that would take us through the end of 2021, and then we go through a formal adoption process. So in order for this engagement process to be meaningful and effective, we must acknowledge that previous planning efforts have implicitly excluded underrepresented populations. And that has resulted in the creation of policies that may not serve the community in a truly equitable way. And they overlook the needs of communities of color, the economically disadvantaged, and other groups who may not feel comfortable engaging with government or local government. Therefore, we have some objectives which are intended to remedy that situation. And that's through a very robust and equitable community outreach program. From visioning through the update, we'll be listening to the community. We don't have a huge budget, but we're going to stretch what we can, and we'll be probably incorporating a lot of leverage from our project advisory teams and our advisory groups that we already have. Our outreach efforts will ensure that all citizens have an opportunity to be heard and understand how their comments and questions are incorporated into the process. We're going to track every comment we have and get and put it into our database and tracking system. And then we also want to explain to people how those decisions have informed the planning process and what happened as a result. Did something happen? We heard you, but based on such and such, we did not make that policy change because why? And we will have to explain those decisions as we go forward. And we also want to make sure that whatever tools we're going to be using, which because of COVID-19 for the foreseeable future are going to be largely online, either through the phone and other ways, I'm going to talk more about that, but that they are accessible and appropriate, that they're culturally and linguistically appropriate. We're going to put out all of our materials in Spanish as well as English. And then we want people to feel safe and familiar using those tools. So some of the communication tools that we're talking about in the draft are to provide information about events and activities and opportunities to be involved in the visioning process. And then I already talked about the basic questions that we're asking. And so you see here a list of things that we are doing already. We've got our website up and running. That's going to be our go-to for a lot of the outreach. We'll be embedding surveys in it and that sort of thing. And if you have suggestions about the website or how to make it more approachable or easy to read or where to find things, please let me know. This slide lists the activities and communication tools that we'll be using. Where applicable, alternative strategies are discussed in the engagement plan for in-person gatherings, but those are restricted now due to the uncertainties of COVID-19. But as we go through this process, before each activity, we'll assess the current conditions and refine the strategy or approach behind each tool to meet project needs and engage a full range of community members. And then one of the things that I'm working on right now is the project advisory team. I think we've put together positions, about 27 positions on the project advisory team. You probably saw my email about it. Tonight, I'd like us to select a primary and alternate member to serve on the project advisory team as the Natural Resources Committee representative. But it's a big team, and it's going to have a lot more positions on it than we typically have, including youth, LGBTQ position, community health position, and we're going to have a very open and transparent discussion about what makes up Oregon City's community. It's not just the people that we see all the time. It's the people that can't make it to meetings because they have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, or a family. And they are aware that government is doing our thing, but they just have no way to be involved, either because time constraints or there's no mechanism for them to do that. So these are some of the activities we want to focus on. So the initial listening phase, as I said, starts now and continues through the end of October. And then this is our tentative schedule, but I think this is what the consultant is scoped to do right now. If things happen, because they may be unpredictable, and in the fall, if COVID-19 comes back, we may have to extend the schedule out. But one of the nice things about our approach with this was we kind of had to think fast and adapt the scope of work to the COVID-19 situation. And, there were a lot of concerns that came out from the Planning Commission and City Commission that now's not the time. And our response was well, if not now, when? Because we can't say for a fact that we won't be in this situation for a long time to come. And in any event, some of the tools that we're talking about using will provide a broader platform for people to be involved, provided that we can get the word out there. And so we are on this schedule. You'll see a section called Community Conversations. That stage of the visioning process is going to rely heavily on the project advisory team. Each member, we're going to be asking to do 5 conversations with groups that they know, either in their living room or something like that. And we're going to provide them with a kit of questions and tools so that they can use the same kind of set of questions at each of their community conversations. In addition to that, you have some fairly traditional things like passive poster activities, community events that we do either online or in person. We're going to have a photo contest where we just ask people to, send us photographs of the areas of Oregon City they like the most and tell us why that is, and then use that as a basis for visioning. So we're also working with the living room youth LGBTQ group. That's just an example. We've got some ROTC students who have signed up to be on the project advisory team from Oregon City High School. And I think we're going to get better youth engagement than we've ever had before. I'm really impressed with how students are wanting to get involved in their local government. And if you know of any kids that want to get involved, please have them get in touch with me. Brief word about the logo. Commissioner Rocky Smith has 2 graphic design classes at Oregon City High School, and we had a competition, and we had about 50 designs sent in, and this design was the winner by a Russian student who was here on a Rotary exchange, and he went back to Russia last week, but we were able to send him a notice and a $150 through the Rotary program for his winning design. So that's all I have for now. I'll be coming back to you regularly to talk about where we're at in the process. And as far as the project advisory team, we'll be having 10 meetings of the project advisory team, probably a commitment of about 2 hours per meeting, and then you'll have readings outside of that. So, you know, a 4 to 5 hour commitment a month on the project advisory team. All right. Are there any questions?
So how do you envision some of these virtual gatherings playing out? I mean, you can't have living room meetings for quite a long time. So,
Right.
you know, that's sort of
There'll
a
be
way of gathering people together.
part of the community conversations idea is that people can have either phone trees or Zoom meetings on their own.
Yeah.
Record them or take notes. The kit will include ways to record and bring back the information that are from those meetings. The project advisory team meetings, for now, I believe we're going to be doing them via Zoom. Right now, everything's going to be online for the foreseeable future. The website will have, you were just asking specifically about the gatherings. If we have the opportunity to have socially distanced concerts in the park, for example, if that opportunity even presents itself, we're going to take advantage of it. If we are able to have, you know, farmers markets coming back, we'll take advantage of those as well.
Farmers market is open,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. Today was the deadline for our project advisory team. So applications, but if we want to talk about that, that would be very helpful. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you have like a group that develop media that, you know, if we wanted to make a video about, you know, the parks of Oregon City or the, you know, issues that we think really ought to be in the plan that need, you know, that could be visualized?
Yeah, our hope was to do about 3 videos, one starting now.
Yeah.
Through help with Kristen Brown. She's our communications coordinator, helping with that, and leveraged her talents. We've got a little bit of a studio, and we don't have a current agreement with Willamette Falls Media, but I'm working with Melody on that. What's your suggestion there? I'd like to take more notes on that.
Well, for example, if people want to give a presentation, you want to play it again and again and again, you could develop a media, you know, a YouTube type video that people could access whenever from the website.
Yeah.
Give like 20 people a chance to say how they feel about a particular issue, you know, that's important. And if you could stage those issues as themes, you know, and not overwhelm, I mean, you don't really, it's hard to keep people's attention these days, you know, for too many minutes, right?
Right.
So you have to break it up into bits that are enticing. And so,
Yeah.
you know, media, everybody's just so accustomed to having, you know, being a YouTube star and that sort of thing. It just seems like having that as a really important part of your message giving process is going to reach a lot more people than it would if it's, you know, you expect them to come to a concert where you have to sit 6 feet apart from everybody.
Right.
You're not going to get too many people going to that, you know.
I love the idea of using tools like that. Just a matter of sitting down and hammering it out, and then having the proper link to our survey. I'm going to be embedding the survey in the website tomorrow, and then I think we can work on a video like that. That's a great idea, and I did want to do that. Any other suggestions?
I just went through your website. It looks pretty good. I mean, it's visual right now. It's got some good points, but it's waiting for information.
Yeah. Yeah. FAQ document in there. We added some equity resources on the resources page, the project library page, with some good links to videos on there. About the history of zoning, for example, and its role in segregation and racism. And some other good stuff. So if you have some good engaging videos, we'll just put those in the website.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good start. I think current events are pushing things, you know, conversations in some pretty radical directions. I mean, even the city commission meeting on Sunday, I watched that and it was like, wow, you know.
Yeah, no, it's been a busy week.
That's a, so, you know, it's an opportunity as well as a, you know, overarching distraction.
Yeah, good point.
From the planning process, but you know, obviously it's the time.
We want to put equity at the center of this plan, Mike. It's just such a challenge with a limited budget. So,
you know,
the visioning portion of this is only $40,000, and we got maybe another $15,000 to spend on incentives for gift cards for people to take a survey.
Right.
Use them at a local business. So want to use that as well.
So I know a few months ago when we talked about this, I really want to see climate addressed in this plan somehow, and it's not even mentioned here in this so far that I just scanned. So I don't view it as a separate little bullet point. I view it as like affecting everything. And, you know, that can be done, you know, without being polarized through political, you know, opinion.
Completely.
So how do we do that? How do we, you know, get to that direction? Sort of our role, I think, with the NRC, but we aren't, excuse me, we aren't the climate committee, you know, we're traditional natural resources kind of people. But obviously, we're professional.
Climate's going to affect that.
I think
natively, so
getting it into the vision, getting that impetus into the vision before we start writing the plan is the first step.
I would really promote that. I think you're.
I second that completely. Yeah, that's got to be a big one.
Well, also, I mean, if equity is at the center of the plan, climate change disproportionately impacts folks of color and you know, of different socioeconomic status. So I feel like those things can be chained together in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. What about the rest of you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's a tough one to address because, like I said, there's so many aspects to it, I guess you could say. How do you best address it?
I have a ex-student who had a 2-year internship, a presidential fellowship with the Department of Agriculture in DC, and his job was to look at the impact of climate change on farmers. And I looked at him and I said, does the Secretary of Agriculture believe in climate change? I'm shocked. He goes, well, he believes it's happening. He doesn't think it's being caused by humans, but he believes it's happening and we need to protect farmers. So coming from that avenue, that it's happening and we need to do something because it's happening regardless of what the causes are, is still going to get it in there, and not polarize things as politically as, you know, kind of sliding it in the back door, but nonetheless, it gets it in there.
Well, a conversation could be had just about everything and how climate is involved in it, and whether you agree on how much change is happening. And, you know, there's still some really solid planning and science and, management that informs us, on what that conversation should be. But, to have it be completely scrubbed from anything because of its political sensitivity, to me, that time is gone,
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
And just the natural hazards that are implicated,
Yeah, I mean,
fires
it is part of
and
natural
drought.
hazard mitigation. And
Absolutely. Forest health, diseases. It's all related, it's an ecology, and climate is just one of those big pieces of the ecology puzzle.
yeah,
So our urban ecology is really, we want to be the tree city, right? So just to maintain that status, we have to keep our trees healthy.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then the policy ramifications of that are not currently addressed in the 2003 plan. They're not there. You won't see them. You'll see a lot of stuff about the environment and sustainability, but nothing that, graduates to an action item, from a goal to a policy to an action item. And we don't want a plan that is so long that you don't want to read it. We want a set of action items that are readily actionable. So that come out of that. And I think that will be, I didn't share the slide that showed what the tentative chapters of the plan are, but the current document is set up like the statewide land use planning goals, which are, 1 through 19, and I think this document's going to be different. It's going to have a section on environment. It's going to have a section on community culture. It's going to have a section on governance, and those things. And so it'll be hopefully a more readable document. And those chapters haven't been decided yet and what goes into them. More of a social policy document as well as a land use document.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's some examples that we can look to, like City of Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to build off of our own. So
yeah.
Well, we at least have to get to the level of the state, mandated level of awareness and action.
yeah,
I'm not sure we're there as a city.
It's surprising to me that Metro wasn't able to write a cogent climate plan,
right,
as a regional body. It just became so wonky that people didn't want to work with it.
Yeah.
So something simpler is going to be beneficial to me as a planner.
Well, it should be. We're a small city,
Yeah.
We're not the metro, which has, so much more population and land area.
So appreciate your thoughts moving forward on this. Feel free to send me questions, comments at any time.
What kind of social media platforms like Facebook does this get posted in, like Oregon City Chit Chat? I've seen it in a couple of places, and actually on Oregon City Chit Chat, somebody had seen the email and was interested in serving on the committee and sent out a thing. Has anybody ever done anything for groups on the city, and what was your experience? So I got back to him and
interesting.
some positive feedback, but I can't remember who it was, so I'll never know whether they did it or not. But
well, sorry, my dog's. I gotta let my dog upstairs.
I think that's all of us. Mine was barking a while ago, and then there was a squirrel in the yard.
Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
That doesn't
My
happen.
poor daughter would be having Zoom meetings with the librarians at Franklin High School, and her 7-year-old would start running through going, go away.
You can see my dog. There you
Oh,
go.
he's good, buddy.
Hello.
That's a cute pup.
There
Yeah.
you go. Hey, Bubba. All right, sorry.
We have to have animal breaks. I had more students with cats this semester. It was amazing.
Yeah, so I just, I kind of want to put your mind at ease that the first year is visioning, second year is policy. But if we don't, hammer away on the important things during the visioning process, we won't write the right policy. So,
Is anybody from this group interested or could be on the committee? I mean, I don't know how the committee is going to be made up, but
yeah, we need one member and to serve, and then a backup alternate. We'll also have, Prac will have a member, blah, blah, blah. So
if anybody's interested, feel free to jump forward. We're back in boots on the ground in McMinnville come fall, and I'm going to be overwhelmed getting ready for that because you can't have a class of more than 25, and my lab will hold 9 students, and
yeah.
So it's like it's crazy already.
Yeah, I understand.
I could maybe volunteer for the alternate role, but I've got a 2-month-old now, and so I'm like just surviving a little bit. So I wouldn't want to put myself in the primary slot for that, just because it seems like every couple of weeks it's like a new routine. But I could do alternate.
Yeah, and Doug's not here too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to throw my hat in the ring, although, you just laid out all the difficulties, all the practical considerations with everybody being on lockdown. And that is a major marketing just kind of hurdle. So like, I kind of doubt my efficacy. Like, I'd imagine that if I were to get out there, my circle is pretty much limited to my neighborhood. I don't think I would be all that effective. It's my little girl. I don't think I would be all that effective at reaching far-flung neighborhoods and areas of the city. So yeah, I mean, I would love to take on the challenge, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Although, I feel like I would need some help kind of brainstorming and strategizing how to actually do the outreach.
Well, that's what we're going to equip people to do. Community conversations, and we'll be training. We'll on a video training session. Training session to talk through it. Steve Faust hasn't gotten that started yet, but they're working on that next.
I mean, I definitely spent some time canvassing in college. I mean, I think there's no substitute for just being face to face with somebody.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And, it's a shame that places like the library are shut down, because that's where, you figure that you'd find the most kind of civically engaged people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked to the library staff. They have a big staff. We're hoping that we can leverage them.
Mm-hmm.
What about farmers market? Because, they've got an info booth, and that's talking about civically minded and engaged portions of the Oregon City population. Like, I feel like farmers market would be great.
And I've seen lots of political I'm on this committee because I think the parks people had a booth, and I went and talked to them, and they convinced me to apply for this committee. So, it's somewhat effective. And so, it might be worth having a booth at the market, and, it could be the Natural Resource Committee and maybe PRAC share a booth and take turns manning it 6 feet apart.
Either that or hijack the mic for a little while. They always have a musical act going.
That's true.
Yeah. Go ahead, step in for 5 minutes every hour or so. And
I might let you do that.
Yeah.
Well, my vote is for one of you younger guys to take the lead, because, it's a pretty youthful city and getting younger every year. So I think, and we got your backs. I mean, if you need anything vetted from an accuracy standpoint, or just, but being a retired professor, I've kind of been put out to pastures, they say.
Oh, what do you mean, man? Knowledge, you got the chops.
I still nothing, so
I chop so much that I've got dentures now, And Nancy's right behind me, so.
I'm not too far from there.
But I think it doesn't have to be just two of us, Pete, that are engaged in it. I think it's a really important thing.
Yeah.
You can alternate, potentially, if somebody's got things and they have to stop being on the PAT, you know, and somebody else want to step up, that's going to happen. We have to be ready for that. So
And are you going to be flexible if like 3 of us wanted to attend a particular meeting? You know, would
sure,
you
that's
open
fine.
to that?
They're public meetings, you know. The
Yeah.
difficulty is, well, I heard someone say that they had 500 people on a Zoom.
Oh,
No.
Ugh.
Good Lord.
I'm not saying it
Nice.
was a collaborative thing. It was more just listening, you know. So, but
So
I had
like what we're doing right
reservations.
now, is this being broadcast through
No.
the TV station? Okay.
No.
But it's being recorded, so it'll go up
Yeah.
on YouTube
Yeah.
or on wherever the city has its
It'll
archive.
be posted to YouTube.
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
know, if you guys had questions, you could always contact any one of us to ask, you know, for details or what do you think about this, or, you know, 'cause we're all behind what we're doing. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, what's the timeline on this decision? Are we looking to have our mind made by the end of this meeting?
I would say by the end of this week,
By the end of this week?
decide right now, because Doug's not here.
Okay.
And I'd like his input. I'm not sure what happened, but he maybe spaced it. I don't know.
I'm with supporting Chris and Devin doing it, but like I said, we can wait to see what
Yeah.
Doug
Yeah.
does.
Let's-
It
let's-
interests me, but I'm not sure I have the capacity the rest of even this year, next year with some stuff going on at work that I'm not sure I could dive into it as much as I probably should.
I got it.
and I like the
Fair enough.
idea of younger people taking it out to the community. I mean, no, I mean literally.
Yeah,
I-
no.
My neighborhood, most of the new people moving into my neighborhood are all younger people. It's
They
really
are,
good
yeah.
to see. So
They are.
So just so you know, like our consultants did a similar thing in Cornelius, and it was really effective. The community conversations kits they put together, people were happy and they like to use them. They may even help design them, but I think they're just going to try to model it off of that. So I've seen some of the examples, but they're just too detailed to share at this moment. Yeah. All right, so let's think about it and then try to decide before, you know, Friday. And that shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't hold up anything.
What day is it anyway? I don't even know anymore.
Wednesday.
I know.
don't either. It's crazy.
I know. All right,
Thursday.
thanks, guys. That one, should we call that one done?
yeah, that's good.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Agenda analysis. I don't know.
Agenda analysis. So as far as big decisions tonight, we got draft public property tree removal policy. I was just going to share that with you. Very first bite at the apple. Not going to the planning commission anytime soon.
Oh.
But and then another recap on the Abernathy Bridge thing. So maybe we can just stay with the agenda. But if you have anything else you want to add, now's the time to bring it up.
I'd like to find out what happened with Beaver Creek project. That I know some people were going before the city and talking about things, and I was very appreciative. And I saw people doing stuff because I was swamped at that point.
Yeah.
So,
It's on the agenda for, when is it? I think it's coming up on the June 22nd Planning Commission agenda. Or no. Sorry, Nancy, that's not right. I think it's on City Commission next Wednesday. The first public hearing.
okay.
So,
Could we briefly talk about where it's at right now?
I don't know anything about it, but yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Probably no more than I do, which is absolutely nothing.
There's a ton of exhibits attached to the agenda for that. I'm not familiar with all of them. But you want to talk about that first? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody else okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. let me pull up the agenda. Notice for ordinance for reading. Okay. This over here. And screen. Okay. Does everybody see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So Wednesday, June 17th, public hearings, first reading, Nimble Creek concept plan, Beaver Creek Road concept plan, code and zoning amendments, then all the attachments, staff report. I'm just looking for the NRC things. There's amendments to various master plans, including the Parks Master Plan, Trails Master Plan. And Exhibit 24B is the letter to the Planning Commission about upland habitat.
Right.
Exhibit 24G, upland habitat versus geologic hazards. So let's just open up B. Come on. You see that?
Not yet.
Nope.
Oh, I gotta share the screen onto that. Oh. Sorry, I'm not really sure about that. Okay, share. Okay, so you see that now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me read. So NRC reviewed a presentation by Christina at October 9th meeting. And while a fair amount of the area identified as upland habitat was already in a natural resource overlay district, NRC felt there's much greater need to protect contiguous forest habitat of outside of the NROD. There were areas 3 and 4. Let me zoom in. It's not.
Oh, yeah.
So that these two areas here were within the geologic hazard overlay zone already and are protected from development. But the area here had some contiguous forest habitat outside of the NROD. And I think that was one of the main issues, right, Nancy?
I actually think it was the one to the right.
To the right,
That's
this
in the
one.
geologic hazard. A lot of that was in the geological hazard, but there were parts of that that were outside of the geological hazard that they were going to develop.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
think those were the ones because they are contiguous with the Thimble Creek Forest.
With the
The
Thimble
ones
Creek
we
drainage.
really wanted, yeah, those are the ones we really wanted to protect,
Yeah,
that contiguous forest area.
okay. Okay. I haven't read the recommendation on that. There is some an exhibit in here, but I'm thinking on the fly.
Right.
Let me just see. Okay. All right, hang on. So I would recommend, let's look at that. Where's the agenda? Yeah. What did you want to say beyond what we've said already? Do we want to put another letter in for the city commission?
I don't know. I mean, I wrote that letter a while
Yeah.
ago about the importance of contiguous forest habitat.
And it's in the record.
Okay, but I don't see it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can look close, but I don't see that it's listed to that. So, and that was from me, not from the NRC. So,
Hang on. Upland habitat. Title 13. Comments. There's so many exhibits here. There's
So Nancy, you're asking if it ended up into a staff recommendation
yeah.
to adopt that area or to
Yeah.
include that area that had been left out.
I'd have to read the staff report.
Right.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Do you want to get back to us? I
Yeah.
mean, we can agree that if there's nothing in there, that maybe I should reformalize that letter, but have it be from the NRC instead of just from me.
Yeah, we can do it via a vote where you all respond back to me individually.
Okay.
That's the one way we can do it.
Okay.
Put in another letter and a plug for that.
Right.
Why don't we do that? Because
Okay.
I'm leading you down a rabbit hole here.
Do you want to look at the staff recommendations first and get back to me? And then if it's not in there, that I'll go ahead and write that letter and we can send it out to everybody.
Yeah. The staff report is the very first item on the agenda. So if it's anywhere, it's in there. And I haven't read it yet, Nancy.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds
Can you
good.
get back to me like by tomorrow, and then I will write something up tomorrow and get it to you, and I can send it out. Do you want to send it out to everybody? What's the formal way to do this?
Well, BCC everybody, and then you respond only back to me.
Okay, when we respond, we only respond back to you.
Yeah.
Aye or a no. Okay.
Yeah. And then, if we need to do a 24-hour notice to have to come together on a Zoom meeting to make a decision, we can do that.
Yeah.
The meeting's on the 17th.
Wednesday night.
So next week.
Next week. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
What else do we have to do?
Yeah, I know. Work in the yard.
Well, the weeds are still growing faster than my bin size.
It's the rain. I mean, the rain's great, but it makes out the weeds are growing. I've got grass that looks like August grass. It's like I was out there going, I need a sigh.
It's been bad
I
this
don't
year.
have grass. The bark chips for the dogs.
I could only wish for that.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Let's
So
see.
we have approval of like 5 months worth of minutes. Did anybody get a chance to look over those before the meeting? I was reading all the other stuff and didn't get to them.
If you didn't, we can table it.
Well, I'm going to make just a suggestion that before the next official meeting, everybody read through all of those minutes to be prepared to go yes or no, so we can just get rid of them all at one time.
It'd be
You got
fun.
homework to do. I'm giving you homework. I feel like
That sounds good to me.
That
Yeah.
is doable.
Homework's good, Nancy.
It is, yeah. My students
Alright.
never think so, but yeah.
Coming from the professors.
That's
I
your
know.
homework.
Do your homework.
homework.
I'll take points off. No.
The good news about the minutes apparently is that the transcriptionist is caught up.
Yay. She got a chance to catch up because we didn't have any meetings.
Yeah.
That's great. Well,
That's
the
good.
circumstances aren't great, but the
No.
product is okay.
Okay, let me get, what's next?
Old business, the draft public property tree removal policy.
Right, okay.
I saw you had that up a while ago. So.
I
Or you
didn't
had your
accidentally
list somewhere.
close that. Yeah, okay, where was it? Now I've gone and lost it. Where is it? Projects 2019.
So is this draft changed, Pete?
This draft is brand new.
It is brand new. Okay.
The policy document you may have seen before, but the
Okay.
code
Yeah.
is brand new. And sorry.
We talked about parts of it, but it looked.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up on the screen and move through it here. So let's go through the policy and then look at the code real quick. Come on. Okay, so this all was prompted by the removal of some very large trees at the library a long time ago.
Yep.
And based on that, the direction from the city manager was to come up with a process for tree removal, permitting, and notification on publicly owned land. Initially, this policy was only for city-owned land, but based on the limited direction that we've been given by the city commission, it applies to any public land. I anticipate that there's going to be some pushback once we get into the public hearing process because of that. However, that's the way it's written right now. We have a variety of codes that deal with tree removal on non-residential property. So today, you need a permit to remove a tree on a non-residential property, and that's generally a over-the-counter type 1 review. It requires an arborist report or a landscape architect report, depending on whether it's a formal landscape area or a tree that's just growing voluntarily. So the process that was missing from all of this principally was public notice and the opportunity for people to comment on the removal prior to it happening. The decisions were made based on objective code criteria, but they didn't have a step in there where if the tree was of a certain size or certain species or significant in any way, there would be a period within which somebody could see a sign on the tree, call the city, ask questions about it, that sort of thing. So this is the policy that we want to apply to city staff and on public land is that notice process would be basically mandatory if your tree is on the heritage tree list. The heritage tree list is a list that's in the code for voluntary designation by consent of a property owner, but it provides a threshold for trees that are deciduous, that are 20 inches or larger, to be considered heritage trees, and trees that are conifers over a certain size. And then there's species listed as well, native species over a certain size. So I think previously the NRC had looked at this and decided that that was a good basis to trigger this process. And now what we're really talking about is but let's go through this. So the very first step in this process is determine whether the tree is an imminent hazard. And that is a specific definition in the code for a tree that's already fallen or is estimated to fall within 72 hours, as determined by Oregon City Public Works personnel or emergency personnel from another agency, PGE, or a certified arborist. And in those situations, they still got a permit, get a permit, but it can be removed and they get the permit and do the mitigation after the fact. If it's not an imminent hazard, then we move on to regular permitting, which applies to trees that are on public property, but not in the street, not in the right of way, 6 inches of diameter or greater. And then it applies to removal of any tree in the right of way, including street trees. We issue street tree permits for that. Natural Resource Overlay District. There's a type 1 NROD exemption, but it triggers a arborist report in some cases, unless the tree is obviously dead, which we've discussed already in that code amendment. Geologic hazard is under Public Works jurisdiction, and there's a restriction on canopy removal over certain slopes. So the moment that you're removing significant canopy on a slope, 25% or more, then you need a waiver from Public Works before that occurs. And then tree removal within the Willamette River Greenway will trigger a type 2 review for compliance with that. And that Greenway overlaps with the Natural Resources Overlay District and actually extends even farther in the case of Kenema. It extends all the way up to South End Road, for example. Any questions so far? And then there are some things about tree removal in the Historic Overlay District, but it's rare that that comes up because it's usually covered by one of the other situations. So in addition to those permit requirements, you got to get an arborist report for all tree removal except for street tree removal if the tree is lifting the sidewalk greater than 20.5 inches and creating a tripping hazard. So that's been our policy for a very long time. And the purpose of that is to assess the tree's condition and any potential hazards. And then trees that are eligible as heritage trees will trigger a notice process. The city may not have the authority to deny tree removal in this situation. However, if it's a public property that this tree is on and it's proposed for removal, that's going to trigger a notice process, which we're going to talk about. This is the list I was referring to.
Right.
And then the notice would be provided on the website, as well as emails provided to PRAC, NRC, CIC, the neighborhood associations, and the city commission. There'll be a physical notice posted on the tree for a minimum of 7 calendar days. Notice is a certain size. It has to have 48-point font. It cannot be screwed into the tree. It has to be attached with twine or wire. And then the mitigation requirement on a tree of that that's triggered under this list here. If it's 25 inches or greater, you can only mitigate with trees that are a minimum of 2.5-inch diameter or more. You cannot use fee in lieu of planting. You have to replant. Trees must be planted on-site, off-site, or off-site in a location that's chosen by the city. And then in order to encourage a larger caliper tree diameter, mitigation requirements can be reduced by 3 trees for every tree that's planted that is 4 inches diameter or greater. I think that's part of the code stuff, but we'll share that. Additional requirements for trees that are removed by the city. If there are any unresolved concerns during the public notice period, then the decision would be sent up to the city manager's office for further review. And that means that the city manager will make the decision either to send the decision over to the city commission or provide another mechanism such as further notice, a greater waiting period or something like that. They're wanting to require reuse of wood for trees of that size. So to the greatest extent they can, they want to repurpose it for city or public projects. Can be used for environmental enhancement, firewood, furniture, or crafts. And then absolute city commission approval required for any tree that's supposed to be removed over 50 inches in diameter. Notification sent to NRC, PRAC, and the Transportation Advisory Committee as applicable. And then the city commission wanted to establish a dedicated fund for alternatives to tree removal. And I don't know where that money is coming from yet. I assume as we move through this process, the city commission will make that decision. So that's the policy. I think the code is a little easier to read. Let's see. All right. Oh. Okay. Hi, everybody.
I have to keep muting myself. My dog is insisting on barking at everything tonight.
Okay, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Chapter 1741. So this is our standard chapter for development review tree removal standards. Applicability. So as you can see, it applies to land use process. It applies on steep slopes. It applies to heritage trees and groves. And it would apply to tree removal on public property in any zone subject to compliance with this chapter. So that basically means any zone where it's owned metro property, city property, county property, PGE. And there are a few public agencies where they claim not to be public, they claim to be quasi-public, and I think that's going to require further discussion. The new section for tree removal on public property lists the same things we talked about. If it's eligible for heritage tree designation, then there's a public notice, physical notice posted on a tree, website and physical notice must remain posted for a minimum of 7 days, and no permit will be issued until the notice period's ended. And then we talked about what the mitigation standards are for the larger diameter trees. And then there's a requirement to repurpose the wood if it's free of infestation. So everything else here is existing code. So I think that's the only section. We did add a definition for what public property is. So local, state, federal government, publicly owned utility provider, schools, colleges, and public right-of-way. Okay, and that's it. I didn't write this code, but I did look over the shoulder of several other planners as they wrote it. I anticipate it's going to take a lot more hearings to get it to where we want, because I think Metro has concerns about being subject to this when they really are managing large scale areas for habitat enhancement and need to do tree removal for that purpose alone. We've heard from Brian Vaughn at Metro, who's their senior scientist, but we haven't had formal public comment from them yet.
Yeah, I could see you, for example, having something in there about parks management, being unique and, subject to a different evaluation process than just something street side.
Yeah. Parks and natural areas.
In natural areas especially.
Yeah.
Kanema is the only natural area, I think, within the city limits, right? Is that right?
Well, we have Newell Creek Canyon.
That's right, Newell's coming online. Yep.
Yeah.
So there's two of them.
Yeah. I have a question for everybody.
Yeah.
I know, so Metro controls a lot of properties within Oregon City. Are there any other land trusts kind of operating within our purview?
Land trusts?
Yeah, like large, significant land trusts.
Yeah. Well, the county has some pretty sizable land parcels, but most of those are for shop areas and things like that. Abernathy Creek backs up, the county shops back up to Abernathy Creek. Oregon City, pardon?
Community College has some natural areas.
That's right. Newell Creek headwaters on the community college campus. The city has some pretty sizable storm ponds that are in the natural resource overlay areas that are subject to maintenance by the stormwater department, who also have to abide by the natural resource overlay district requirements as well. So there's that.
But natural areas is pretty much a shorthand for any large area of land, regardless of the agency, that's just managed in a.
I don't think the term natural areas is defined yet.
Okay. I'm just curious, like what would actually warrant an exemption from this?
Yeah. Well, I don't know yet because we haven't heard from those agencies.
Gotcha.
Sure, Metro would be happy to define natural area for you.
Yeah, they have pretty specific definitions. I mean, just a real quick example would be a dead tree being kept at a preserve for wildlife habitat, whereas under any other circumstance, it would be considered a hazard tree in the city, and dropped before it could accidentally fall down on somebody. So,
Really good point, and one that Jerry Herman has had to make again and again and again.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the state has some lands down along Abernathy Creek too, on 17th, near the railroad trestle.
Right.
And then, of course, there's Newell Creek Canyon, which is pretty huge. And then the county is, a lot of Newell Creek Canyon is in the county. So they're subject to, because they're in the UGB, actually they're not, but they are subject to statewide land use requirements, same as we are.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you all for the clarification.
Well, I wrote down that the term isn't defined in our code. So,
Right.
yeah. All right.
Yep.
All right. Any other comments on that one?
It's going to be interesting to see what the public comments are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It hasn't been sent out for public notice yet. I think what we're planning to do is a work session with Planning Commission on July 20th. And that's a ways out.
Yeah.
And I think by that time we'll have started a formal land use process and a notice for legislative action. And so once we have the legislative action, we'll send out notice. We have to send notice to everybody that is affected by the regulation. So we have to choose all those natural areas and send notice to all those individuals. And probably everywhere within 300 feet of those areas as well, if we're talking about specific sites. And if we can identify them, and I know that we can because we've got the GIS to do that, targeted notice is usually better than just doing a blanket notice.
Does Portland have a similar code? And if so, how do they handle things like Forest Park and,
Right.
Powell Butte and
Is it Portland Urban Forestry or Portland Parks, whatever they call themselves this week? They had 10 foresters like 4 years ago. And those foresters were trained to assess whether or not a tree was truly a hazard and to deny removal permits based on that sort of thing. Those decisions could be appealed to the Portland Forestry Board, the arborists and things like that. They have a tree removal process that looks like a land use process with type 1, type 2. We're moving in that direction. Everything that we're doing right now is rather piecemeal. It's in response to political situations. I don't think that's a good way to make public policy, just in general. But it's going in the right direction. The difficulty is that to rewrite the tree code and start that permitting like Gresham does it or Portland does it or somebody else does it requires more public outreach at this point. So at this point, the city commission's direction is to focus on publicly owned land. And then in the future, if we develop a program and fund it, because I think we estimated that for our city, it's about 1.5 FTE, not including code enforcement. Right now, planning attempts to do manage a tree program. We're not trained. I have a forestry degree and I'm trained, but I'm a land use planner first and foremost, and that's where what I'm supposed to be doing. We don't charge for tree removal permits. The only permits that do get reviewed are the ones that come into the land use process. So that's the non-residential stuff and the multifamily stuff and the city-owned stuff now. So we're raising the bar and we're raising it on ourselves, and that's fine. I think that's appropriate. I just think that it's missing a big chunk of the city still. Mm-hmm. Case in point would be that upland habitat in Thimble Creek, for example.
Yeah.
Because you have an aerial photography where your overlay district is based on an aerial photo that's a snapshot from 2005, and it's done for the entire metro area, and it's not necessarily ground truthed. And the city commission and the planning commission don't want to constrain the land any more than it already is because it's within the UGB, and they want to develop it. They want to allow development on it. So the NROD is that clear and objective overlay, but it misses things. So
Yeah. Important things.
it's really important.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other comments on this? I think this project's gotten handed back over to me from Diliana, so I'll be putting together that work session in July. And I think it'll be a joint work session actually with you all. So be prepared for that, July 20th.
Could you sneak in something about exemptions for natural areas or something?
Yeah, I'd like
That
to
might
look,
be appropriate, and that would mitigate a lot of the feedback you're going to get, you know, the pushback from Metro and places like that ahead of time.
yeah, and I can see that being written in. It's like public lands that are natural areas that are management and have an adopted management plan, you know, would be exempt. Public lands that don't have a habitat management plan or a restoration plan of something like that are not necessarily exempt. So
Yeah, that would work.
I think yeah, okay, that's good. Thanks. All right, we're on to our last item,
Yay.
which is, what is it?
205 and Abernathy Bridge.
Oh, this is, yeah, okay, good. So, thank you. What I did was I took the presentation that ODOT gave us and I included the same slides plus a little bit of information about process. But let me explain. Where's my controls? There we are. So let me bring this up. All right. So Diliana Vasileva is the planner that's reviewing this land use application. It is a site plan and design review, a variance for height because the height of the Abernathy Bridge exceeds our maximum height limit of 35 feet. Willamette River Greenway review and natural resource overlay review and floodplain review. So there's 5 applications bundled up. It's a significantly large application, about 400 pages long.
Lovely.
Basically, the request is to get permission from the city for I-205 widening and Abernathy Bridge seismic upgrades. And that includes the variance I mentioned. And because of its proximity to the Willamette River, a variety of overlay districts. It also includes disturbance to the NROD and relocation of Abernathy Creek. And then a new parking area within John Storm Park. And this is the overview that the ODOT provided of the area. And you can see the area that's affected in Oregon City over on this side. We'll have some other. This project area shown here. It's the on-ramps and off-ramps from 99E. And I'm talking about the area within the city limit. Along 205 abutting the Cove and between Main Street and Washington Street and the off-ramps onto 213. There are 5 areas of the NROD that are impacted. I think this is the principal area underneath the bridge, Johnstorm Park. The dark crosshatched areas are the areas of disturbance, and where trees are going to be removed that are larger than 6 inches in diameter. They've identified the species in the individual trees already. And there's quite a bit of invasives over here as well, which they've shown listed here. Western clematis, bindweed, cheatgrass, western blue clematis, high Himalayan blackberry and Canada thistle, Kentucky bluegrass, and tansy ragwort. Let's see. This is the area along 205 where they're widening. A lot of invasive removal, but there are some English hawthorn trees, 3 trees, 12 to 16 inches to be removed.
Which are not native.
Right. And then I think wherever you see an orange, that's where they're going to do mitigation, because there's a 2-to-1 ratio of disturbance to mitigation. So that's helpful and clear. Here's where a lot of trees are being proposed for removal. You know, the screening trees that basically screen Oregon City from the highways you coming through here.
Mhm.
A lot of cedars, 1 Pacific madrone, some big leaf maple, and then some ash. Next one, off ramp, English hawthorn being removed, and Himalayan blackberry, teasel up here,
Yeah. Weed.
which I thought was a wetland species, but I don't know. All right, so in a summary of the mitigation is that it's almost 60,000 square feet of disturbance area within our NROD, and the mitigation would be about 600 trees and close to 3,000 shrubs planted in an area of 117,000 square feet to meet the 2-to-1 mitigation ratio. And this is all discussed in detail in attachment G, which is their mitigation plan. Trees are proposed to be spaced at average of 15 feet on center, shrubs 5 feet on center, groups of 3 to 9 plants. They're proposing a more open density than our code requires. If they do that, there's a provision in the NROD code for an alternative mitigation approach. Has to be documented in a report by a specialist and supported by adequate evidence. So that's discussed in more detail in Appendix G. And then we do have a diversity requirement once you get over a certain number of plantings. So there would be 13 species of shrubs, 19 species of trees, and a mix of several species of grasses and forbs. And then our monitoring period requirement is for 5 years, after which there needs to be at least 80% establishment. ODOT is responsible for monitoring and maintenance and a yearly report to the city about that. They've done this before for the Jug Handle project, and they do a really good job of it. I've been very impressed with what they've done in the past, so we can hold them to that standard. As far as right-of-way access to their mitigation areas, they won't allow the city an easement because they're ODOT, and they have revised statutes that prohibit cities from doing certain things like that. Nonetheless, they're covered by a variety of not indemnification, but insurance requirements so that this will be a successful project. In addition to this, and I'm not an expert on this, I know they talked about it at the last meeting about the relocation of Abernathy Creek. It's talked about in much more detail with more graphics, but they are going to be putting in a partial fish passage barrier right now. And I know Doug Neely was very involved in this discussion at the last meeting. And so they're going to relocate the mouth of the creek somewhat, but and then there'll be, and that would be one of the very last things I think they do. Any comments or questions on that? Willamette River Greenway is something that we just revised the code on that. So now everything is either a type 2 or type 3 review or higher. Apparently this will not change access to the Willamette River, but there will be temporary closure of the boat ramp for 2 weeks. They're replacing existing structures, so it's not considered new development, which means that it normally would not go to the Planning Commission under a public hearing, but in this case, it's going to the Planning Commission because of other applications. And we always bump the entire package of applications up to the highest level of review of any individual application. So that's going to the Planning Commission. And they will, the Willamette River Greenway talks about compatibility, minimizing erosion, promoting bank stability, and maintaining and enhancing water quality and fish and wildlife habitat. But the NROD, the Natural Resource Overlay District, does that already. What the Willamette River Greenway makes sure of, I think, is that you're not imposing new urban development in a way that detracts from the aesthetics of the river or impedes access to the river. And that's a different, more subjective standard than the Natural Resources Overlay District. So. Next steps will be a Planning Commission hearing July 13th. We'll be publishing our staff report 1 week prior to that. We'll have an opportunity for another meeting on July 8th, the NRC. So if we want to put together a recommendation at that time, we have that opportunity. And in the meantime, you can send questions to Diliana or me about the project. Thanks.
Good.
All right. Any other comments or questions about this one? I didn't include the website, but there is a project website on the city website that you can go and look at the reports. Or I can email you just Appendix G because everything else is rather overwhelming.
I remembered hearing a lot of this, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. No, I appreciate listening to it again. Now,
Yeah, it was a good review.
Formal
I'd forgotten all those
application.
Details, yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. So I think we're done with present decisions and items. On to member reports, or what are we?
Yeah, communications, member reports. Anybody
How
have any?
y'all been?
Oh, crazy. Zoomed out.
Sorry to do it to you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all right.
So Pete, in August, I'm going to brave going to Montana, so to Glacier Park. So I will miss our meeting if we have one.
All right. Thanks for letting us know.
But I will give a report when I get back.
Yeah, let us know if you actually see any glaciers.
yeah.
So glaciers and grizzly bears are my two objectives.
Ah, cool. Hope you see grizzly bears.
Yeah.
Also
After
want to
going to
welcome.
Hawaii, they still haven't opened back up. You know, if you go there, you're under a 2-week mandatory quarantine in your hotel room, and
Is that right?
It's
yeah.
crazy.
If you
Yeah,
go to
I know.
Hawaii right now, even and if you're a resident, if you fly into your home state, you are under a mandatory home quarantine for
Wow.
2 weeks. And if you're a visitor, so you can't go for 2 days because you are under a mandatory 14-day. And they're arresting people for like getting home and going to the beach. They just arrested some Oahu lady who got home and went to the beach within a few hours and took her to jail. I mean, they're serious, but they've
They're
got
serious.
their cases down to, I think the new island, I think the big island hasn't had a new case for a week or more now.
That's
There's just a few crop up in Oahu every once in a while, but they've really nipped it in the bud. But you know, when you're isolated like that, you can do that. So
right. Well, Montana seems to be pretty low risk.
yeah. I had a student in Montana. He was going to do his research project in Oregon or in McMinnville, and he ended up doing it in Montana. He lives in Helena, and he came up with some great stuff. So I think it was much more interesting that he did it in Montana.
We'll see.
Wow. Well, Devin, this is your first NRC meeting. What do you think?
Second. Is it your second or third?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's good, different. Zoom is different, you know, but that's actually how I do most of my my meetings for work anyway. So I'm set up for it. So no, it's good.
I noticed you're very well equipped.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
setup.
Yeah, I mean, I've got lights and stuff too on the side. So yeah, we're set up here. There's also the mixer down here. So
Wow.
I think we're going to recruit you for the comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
oh
totally.
man.
You are the media guy. You're
Yeah.
right to do that.
Maybe.
I'll talk to you later. All right. I don't have a whole lot. The planners put together a letter to the city commission via Tony Conkle about what's been going on. And I think that letter is going to become part of the record at the next meeting. We just talked about how important this comprehensive plan update is to including people in this process and trying to make sure that we don't continue to implicitly include racist policies through zoning. And it happens today, you know, large lot requirements, single family residential, every 75% of the city. Yeah, historically that has been the way most cities have been set up, and we're not that much different. And I don't think that it's very difficult to engage this in a way that makes it's been a very difficult week for everybody in the city and the residents. I was at the demonstration on Friday down at the library, which was awesome. It was really, really, really amazing.
I didn't know what was going on until I started seeing people with signs walking past my house. And I'm like, wait, where are they going?
Yeah. So, and then the city commission passed that. I believe, I didn't watch, but they passed that resolution yesterday.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll follow up with you all tomorrow about Thimble Creek.
Mhm.
And what else do we need to do? I think that was the main thing.
Well, you're going to check in with Doug and then see if
Yeah.
Oh, and check
he has
with Doug.
any insight on the participation in the planning.
Yeah.
About the project advisory team for the
Yeah.
comp plan. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Whew. All right.
Great. We'll hear from you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, good
Likewise.
seeing you all.
Appreciate it.
Even
Talk
if
to
you
you
are
later.
TP. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good evening.